At a moment in Donald Trump's presidency and campaign that's beginning to feel a lot like a turning of the tide, as Trump continues to wrap his arms more and more tightly around some of the darker forces that helped to hand him a victory in 2016. The racism, the conspiracy theories, the outright war on truth and facts. New signs today that those forces may be losing some of their power at the ballot box in a country upended by not one, but two current crises. Landing with a thud inside Trump world today, a devastating new poll for the president that shows him a massive, yawning 14 points behind Joe Biden nationally at this intersection of a pandemic and a civil rights uprising in the U.S., with bad marks from voters on Trump's responses to both. And before you say national polls don't matter, and before you start counting out the 4 months until Election Day, a closer look at where Biden's lead is coming from should dispel any doubt that Trump's campaign is looking at this moment as an emergency. Trump is 18 points behind Joe Biden among independent voters. He's down 2 points among voters 65 and older. That is a group that he won by 9 points in the last election. Biden's also up by 28 points among college-educated white voters, 39 points among white women with a college degree. And on the flip side of that group, whites without a college degree. Now, that's the base. That's the group that Trump is counting on to make up the ground that he's losing virtually everywhere else. He's up only 19 points, a big drop from his 36-point lead with that same group in 2016. And this isn't the only bright, flashing warning sign of a poll that's dogged Trump's campaign in just the last few weeks. Polls from Fox News, CNBC, and CNN are all telling the same story of a double-digit lead for Joe Biden. More and more battleground state polls also show Trump in jeopardy. And even some red states like Texas, where Trump is now in a statistical tie. Now, what we'd expect to see in a typical presidential election is some kind of a pivot or adjustment from the candidate, since Trump does, after all, have more than 4 months to go. But so far, we're seeing the opposite from this president. More racism. Just last night, in remarks before a crowd in Arizona, using a term for the coronavirus that doesn't even bear repeating here, at a moment most Americans are calling for reforms around race. More rejection of the basic science, the facts, and the guidance on coronavirus. Trump once again packing a crowd of his supporters as tightly as possible indoors last night, not requiring masks. And it appears most of his supporters took him up on the option not to wear one. Despite the dramatic surge in cases across the South and West that's pushed the country's daily case count back to its highest levels since April. And despite those polls that clearly suggest this isn't the kind of leadership that Americans are looking for, Trump's conduct indicates that he is, as of now, either unwilling or unable to listen.
Look at this. Joe Biden is leading President Trump by 14 points nationally in the latest New York Times Siena College poll. Biden now sits at 50% to Trump's 36% of support. The former vice president also has a 2-point advantage over Trump among voters 65 and older, a group the president carried by 9 points in 2016. It seems things are changing. Biden also has an 18-point advantage among independents and is up 28 points among college-educated whites and 39 points among college-educated white women, while Trump is up 19 points among whites without a degree, a group he won by 36 points in 2016. What does this tell us, Joe?
Yeah, well, it tells us, Willie, national polls this early don't matter. And we have to keep saying that.
Okay.
At the same time, a 14-point loss by the sitting incumbent, down among seniors, group he won handily, down 18 percentage points by independents, and down by massive figures in other areas that he needs to do much better on. You know what? Maybe it doesn't matter a whole lot, but you look at history, and there's just there's no evidence anybody this far down will be able to catch up. But long way to go still.
Yeah, you're right to add all the caveats, but at some point when you have a series of polls showing the same thing, there's something going on here. I think people were so, gun shy because of what happened in 2016 that they hesitate to make any judgments based on these national polls. And of course, it's not a national referendum, but the Fox poll had the spread at 12 last week. This week, the New York Times just this morning at 14. And as you say, what's really most interesting as you go through these numbers, and you can hardly find in this New York Times Siena poll a place where Donald Trump is winning. He's winning with white voters with no college degree by 19 points. But other than that, Jim Vandehei, when you go down the list and you look among women, he's down 22. Men, he's losing by 3 points. Older voters, he's in a statistical tie. Younger voters, he's losing. African American, Latino. You go down the list, and the independent spread of 21 is significant for all the obvious reasons. When you look at this poll, as someone who usually gives us the grain of salt that we need on a national poll, what do you see?
I'm with you guys. You can ignore a poll here, a poll there. The trend is devastating for Donald Trump, and he knows it. Listen, 14 points. When you talk about, hey, there might be a hidden vote, there's not a 15-point hidden vote out there. And there's a lot of indicators. It's not just a national poll. Another poll yesterday in Texas basically tied. The Wisconsin polls, the Minnesota polls, the Pennsylvania polls, Michigan polls, Arizona polls, states that matter polls, all bad for him. Then look at that event, which did not get enough coverage, even though I think people did cover it a lot. In Tulsa, he was talking about 1 million people being interested, hundreds of thousands showing up, side venues having to be put up so that they could have basically rock star appearances by him and Vice President Pence, and almost nobody showed up. A third of the arena is empty. He's devastated afterwards. A lot of turmoil inside the campaign. Why? Where does that turmoil come from? Not from one poll by the New York Times, but from all the polls that they're seeing by Fox, by the New York Times, by Quinnipiac, by all the internal polling that shows the exact same thing. So yes, this can change. He's freaking out. His first meeting of the day now is at 5:30 a.m. with Jason Miller, his campaign strategist, so he can get the latest polls and he can get the latest gossip about politics. And now they're all worked up about how do we smoke Joe Biden out and make it a referendum on Joe Biden and not just on me. And there's no way it's not going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. That's what these numbers show. And the idea that Biden is going to suddenly start taking big chances and come out and do a lot more, why would he? This is working pretty well for him. Make it about Donald Trump. Play it safe. You're the sane alternative. Seems right now like a smart strategy.
But the problem is, Mika, that every day, and we say this every day, and I actually looked at the news yesterday and just came to the conclusion, this does not look like a man who wants to win, who wants to be reelected. Remember when he asked China to help him get elected?
Yeah.
And Marco Rubio came out and said, oh, he's just joshing.
No.
Here, he's asking the Communist Chinese, the People's Republic of China, to rig the election for him, to get involved. And Marco Rubio said, oh, he's just joshing. Isn't that a funny joke? He's just joking. And then Donald Trump came out a couple days later and said, no, I'm not joking. And he repeats it again. And so at this event in Tulsa, the president said that he told people that he wanted to slow down the testing. And everybody said, oh, he's just joking. The president's just joking. His staff members saying, oh, he's just joking. And the president, after they were insisting he was joking, what he said at Tulsa rally on the slow down the testing, he said, no, he wasn't joking. And he said, I don't kid around. So again, time and time again, this guy every day acts like he doesn't want to get reelected. He undercuts his aides who are trying to cover up for previous mistakes that he's making. And the situation just keeps getting worse. And you have to ask yourself, why is a guy who's down 10 points, 12 points, 14 points, why doesn't he adjust? Obviously, he's incapable of adjusting, but at least he proved in 2016 that he knew when to keep quiet. But no. And yesterday, while he was speaking to reporters ahead of his Arizona trip, Donald Trump, once again, basically told people, assume the worst of me at all times. I wasn't joking.
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. We have got the greatest testing program anywhere in the world. We test better than anybody in the world. Our tests are the best in the world, and we have the most of them. By having more tests, we find more cases.
Okay. First of all, you can never let that pass without
the
just
stupidity
saying
is incredible.
The president's lying.
Yeah.
The ignorance is incredible. We don't have the best test in the world. Even yesterday on Capitol Hill, you had Dr. Fauci and the CDC director saying we need to make the test better.
Yeah.
We don't have the best test in the world. They also said, well, nobody ever told us to slow down the testing. But again, Mika, I'll just keep going back to what I've been saying all along. The President of the United States continues to say something as he's about to leave for yet another super spreader event.
That's what these should be called, because that's what they are.
That every American knows is a lie. That somehow, if you stop giving tests, that the infection rate will go down and people will stop dying. Even if we hadn't done any tests, Mika, we would still, despite the fact we only have 4.5% of the world's population and the best scientists, the best doctors, the best everything, like we would still, Mika, have about 1 out of 3 deaths in the world from the coronavirus, from COVID-19, which, of course, the president said, where did they get the 19 from?
Honestly, Joe, when you really look at this presidency, he's never joking. And you and I never want to be on Fifth Avenue with him because he is never joking. And you're right, these events are super spreaders. They may be rallies, they may be some sort of campaign event, but they are before anything, ask any doctor, the perfect petri dish to spread a deadly virus. This is crazy that we're at this point.
He was visiting one of the nation's biggest mega churches to talk to Arizona college students yesterday.
Stuffed together. And listen to this rhetoric.
The Democrats are also trying to rig the election by sending out tens of millions of mail-in ballots using the China virus as the excuse for allowing people not to go to the polls. Hey, we have a virus coming. We have to send, think of it, California. He's going to be sending out millions and millions of ballots. Well, where are they going? Where are these ballots going? Who's getting them? Who is not getting them? A little section that's Republican. This will be, in my opinion, the most corrupt election in the history of our country, and we cannot let this happen. They want it to happen so badly. There's never been anything where they have so many names. I could give you 19 or 20 names for that, right? It's got all different names. Wuhan. Wuhan was catching on. Coronavirus, right? Kung flu, yeah. Kung flu. COVID-19, COVID. I say, what's the 19? COVID-19, some people can't explain what the 19. Give me the COVID-19. I said, that's an odd name. I could give you many, many names. Some people call it the Chinese flu, the China flu, right? They call it the China as opposed to the China. I've never seen anything like it.
I really, Willie, I don't know where to begin. First of all the president had to do was ask any staff member in the White House. They would tell him the 19 came from the year of the outbreak, COVID, corona, virus, disease. Say it with me, COVID-19. COVID-19, the year of the outbreak. That said, I remember back in December of 2015, after seeing Donald Trump's press conference on the Muslim ban. And I think we talked about how it helped him in the polls, in the Republican polls. I remember asking, is this what Germany looked like in 1933? I've got to ask the question, what are people going to be saying about us, Willie, 50 years from now, when you have the President of the United States working himself up into a sweat and a lather, talking about naming the virus something that millions of Americans find deeply offensive, and the crowd breaking out in wild applause? I'm 57 years old. I can safely say that I've never heard anything like this before Donald Trump. And I pray to God, I pray to Jesus that we as a country will never hear anything like this again. The president makes a racist remark, and a crowd of college students break out in wild applause. And getting back to the earlier theme, that this is a guy that doesn't act like he wants to be reelected. You ask any Republican state party chairperson that wants their candidate to win what that does to Asian Americans who used to be a reliable Republican faction. And they say, well, it hurts us, not only with Asian Americans, it hurts us with people of color, it hurts us with a majority of suburban voters, it hurts us with women, whether they have college degrees or not. Again, this is a guy that is driving this campaign off the cliff every day, and it seems that he is working as hard as he can to boil down his base to 30%.
Yeah, and he's enjoying it. And that was the manifestation, a literal manifestation of playing to the base. As he went through the names of COVID-19 and coronavirus, you could hear the crowd waiting for that racist term that he used. It was almost like at the old rallies when they do the lock her up chants. They were waiting to say it. They were there to hear the hit song, to hear one of his lines, and he delivered it, and he delivered it twice. And it's ugly and it's racist, and imagine being an Asian American in this country and hearing your president say that. We heard that side of it, the ugly racist side. We heard the ignorant side, that he didn't know what the 19 stood for. And then we heard the truly, as John Meacham said on this show yesterday morning, perhaps the most damaging side, which is that he's laying this predicate already that the election is rigged. And why is he doing that? Because we have polls that show him down 14 points, that show him getting crushed among women, suburban women, the people he needs to win over to be reelected. He's laying the groundwork to look back, Jonathan Lemire, after Election Day, if he does lose, and say, this election is rigged, we should not go quietly.
It is confounding. I mean, but it is confounding unless you know the history of Donald Trump. I mean, this is a guy who, when the ratings for The Apprentice began to dip and it was no longer the hottest show on television, his idea was, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we do a blacks versus white show? Howard Stern back in 2005. I believe we have that. Let's take a listen to that.
It would be 9 blacks against 9 whites, all highly educated, very smart, strong, beautiful people, right?
Yes.
Do you like it?
Yes.
Do you like it, Robin?
Well, I think you're going to have a riot.
Yes. I like it.
I mean, you know, it is the way he thinks, right? That he thinks that if he can pit black people against white people, it's a hit.
He does. I mean, he sees that that's not only his personal view, but that's his view of America. That's his view of his supporters. He tweeted that there is a big silent majority. So clearly he is banking on the fact that there are people who will respond to this racial grievance-laden, divisive message that will propel him by insulting others. others. I mean, in his speeches this week, he not only used the racial slur to describe Asians to talk about the coronavirus, he did it for Hispanic people, talking about a Mexican that will be lurking in the wings, menacing a woman in her home and who won't be able to call 911. I mean, this is literally a story he made up because there was no actual real person to hit at. Even when he talks about Joe Biden, he says things like Joe Biden isn't running his own campaign, that the campaign and Democratic Party are being run by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar. He's picking women of color to be the villain because it's much harder to make that case against Joe Biden. There was an interesting piece today by Adam Serwer in The Atlantic that said it's really hard to make this race-laden, hateful, divisive message when your opponent is a fairly moderate, older white guy, but he's still trying to do it because he doesn't have the economy. Remember, at this point, he thought he was going to be running on Keep America Great. He thought he was going to have a soaring stock market and a strong economy to run on, and the coronavirus has wiped that out. So he's retreating to what he knows, which is the racial grievance, divisive message that helped propel him in 2016, even though 2020 is a very, very different place.
And the one thing they really need is to step up testing to make sure that they are capturing transmission as quickly as they can to quarantine people so that it doesn't continue to rise. But instead, no, the president is cutting back. And the reason why is right there in front of all our faces. The president keeps telling us he does not like testing because he thinks if you do not test, then you have fewer cases.
When you do testing to that extent, you're going to find more people, you're going to find more cases. So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
When you have all those tests, you have more cases. So the news conference said, they have more cases.
When you said you asked your people to slow down testing, were you just kidding, or do you have a plan to slow down testing?
I don't kid.
There you have it. And get this, it's not just Trump trying to spin this away. Vice President Mike Pence, who is the head of the coronavirus task force the president has utterly lost interest in, Pence, today went into a closed-door meeting with Republican senators and reportedly put a positive spin on how the coronavirus numbers are looking. Senator Tom Tillis saying that Pence said only 3% of counties are actually seeing upward spikes. Don't worry your pretty little head. We're fine. Just 3% of counties. Just one small problem. Land does not get sick, people do. And there are a lot of people in the counties that are seeing spikes, like Harris County in Texas, which is home to Houston with 4.7 million people, or LA County in California with 10 million people, or Maricopa County in Arizona with 4.5 million people, or Miami-Dade County in Florida with 2.7 million people. Oh, just a few counties, don't worry about it. Here's the stark, terrifying, and maddening reality. Cases are now growing in 27 states. We are arguably now at the worst heights of the outbreak on a national scale. We are seeing case growth and record hospitalizations in states like Texas, Florida, and Arizona, and elsewhere. I should note here that at the state level, some Republicans are starting to accept reality. Republican governors like Arizona's Doug Ducey and Greg Abbott in Texas are finally starting to understand the importance of their citizens wearing masks. Governor Abbott is telling people that things are bad as they are, and they need to stay home.
Because the spread is so rampant right now, there's never a reason for you to have to leave your home unless you do need to go out. The safest place for you is at your home.
Now, it's important he's saying that now, but he is still largely plowing ahead with reopening. And he's one of the Republican governors who rushed to open back up in the first place while ignoring what the CDC said was safe, just blowing past their guidelines. In fact, his lieutenant governor, Abbott's lieutenant governor, said that reopening the country was more important than living. I should also note that we are also starting to see some really worrying signs out of some states that more or less did follow the CDC guidelines, right? Like California. California, where we are seeing hospitalizations climb quite significantly, we are seeing positive test rates go up too, as well as new case records. Both of those are bad. In fact, terrifying. It speaks to what public health experts and epidemiologists have been telling us from the moment this first appeared in Wuhan. The virus is dangerous and it is an indefatigable foe. This is going to be a long fight. And so now here we are, experiencing this insane deja vu. Back in February and early March, I was on this program, and many people were screaming our heads off about what was happening in places like China and Italy. And then we started to see the numbers here. And we did not have enough testing, but we could see in places like New York at the heart of the outbreak that things were about to get bad, very bad, and they did. And so we saw how it looked when things got bad. Hospitals melting down, 0.25% of the city's population killed by the virus. And now we are watching it all again across the country. Today, the World Health Organization warned that if we cannot stop the spread, there may be a need to impose or reimpose general lockdowns. Just saying that phrase. And what you cannot get an answer on, from anyone, from the president or the vice president or anyone else in the federal government, is what exactly is supposed to change here to prevent that fate? What is going to make these numbers stop going up?